We are now at chapter 23 of Shabbat. Mishnah Hay is the last Mishnah of the chapter. It should have continued directly with the next one, with the beginning of chapter 24. The beginning of 24 is Misheh Shich Baderech Noten Kisor al-Nukhri. If one is traveling and Shabbat caught him while he's still on the way, and he has with him his wallet and other things that he cannot carry on Shabbat, what does he do with that? That should have been the immediate continuation of the first and second Mishnah in the previous chapter, which speak about lehashich. What can you do on Shabbat before Shabbat ends? So it's around the same theme, but because the Mishnah spoke about the situation of someone passing away on Shabbat, and they brought the coffin or the musical instruments. So the Mishnah segues to talk about what do you do when someone passes away on Shabbat, and also some halachot that relate to death on a regular day. So they said this: Osin kol tzorchei hamet, sachin umedihin oto, ubilvad shelo yazizu bo evar. If someone passed away on Shabbat, everything can be done to take care of the body, including washing and applying, washing the body and applying ointments. They would apply fragrant oils because of the problems of preserving the body for a whole day. I mean, if it happened just at the beginning of Shabbat, it would take 24 hours, 25 hours until burial. If it's during the summer, the heat is a problem. But they would try not to move the body, because it becomes falls under the category of muktzeh, the one that you cannot move around. Shomtin et hakar mitachtav umatilin oto al ha'ol b'shvil sheyamtin. They're allowed to pull, if that person passed away lying on the bed, they're allowed to pull the pillows and the mattress from underneath the body, so it will fall to will end up resting on the ground. The ground back then was not paved, but rather covered with sand, and the sand with certain humidity would keep the body colder than if it would be on mattresses. Kushrin et alehi. Lo she'ale ela shelo yosif. They are allowed also to. This is a procedure that they would do. They would tie. They would tie the cheeks or the jaws to make sure that the mouth stays closed, because otherwise it could continue opening, and it would be an unpleasant situation where that happened. V'chen. And it is interesting how the Mishnah, the author of the Mishnah, works on association. So, speaking about such a tragic situation, you're talking about a dead body and taking care of it on Shabbat, and he says you could tie the lehi, the jaws, lo bishvil sheta'ale ela shelo tosif, not in order to close it, this you can't do, but to prevent it from opening more. And he says similarly, korah shenishbera somchin ota besafsal ba'aruchot hamita, lo sheta'ale ela shelo tosif. He says also if a beam or a log broke on Shabbat, and we're talking about the supportive beams that hold the ceiling, that at the time they used to do it with the beams covered with mats, made of reed, and on top of them plaster. That was the roof. It was not a heavy solid roof. So if one of those beams started cracking, you could take a long bench and put it upside vertically to support the ceiling. Shows you, by the way, the ceilings were not that high. If you could put a bench there, or a long pole that usually would be on top of the bed to put the canopy on top. Not not in order to fix it, just to prevent it from cracking more. So though there is the language is similar, not to fix but to prevent more opening, but it's hard to see how you could associate the two cases of taking care of a dead body and fixing a log, a beam that broke. But this is the kind of the associative mode of thinking of the Tana of the Mishnah. And here the last halacha in the Mishnah applies both to Shabbat and to a regular day. And it says, "En me'ametzin et hamet b'Shabbat." The custom is to close the eyes. When someone passes away, to close the eyes. It's out of respect for the deceased, because we understand and we say that the eyes are the windows of the soul, and now that this conveys this emptiness and this tragedy, so we close the eyes out of respect. But on Shabbat, one cannot do that because it's you cannot move the dead body at all. What people would have done probably is cover the head, so it would not be lying there with the shame of disrespect. And during the week, on a regular day, one cannot close the eyes of a person as that person is dying. Meaning, to do so before the moment of death is forbidden. And if anyone did that while the person was still alive, and even if the death is certain, he is called a murderer. And the Gemara, just closing his eyes.
Disrespectful.
But they say that this could cause a person to die earlier than what would have happened without intervention.
Is it like if somebody is very ill or on the machine or something?
Right. So that is the basis for the whole discussion, which we'll talk about a little bit, because it's a complicated issue of what is called today euthanasia, or do not resuscitate, disconnecting life support, etc. So the Mishnah, the Gemara says the following: Tanu Rabbanan hama'atzemo aymetzivat nefesh arei ze shofech damim. Anyone who closes the eyes before the person died is a murderer. Mashal lenech shekava ve'olechet. Adam maniach etzba'o alea miyad kavta. It says a candle that is flickering could hold on for a while, but if you put your finger on it or you cover the top of the cup, it will die right away. One can argue that the flame would die anyway. Yes, but my intervention caused it to happen sooner. So this became the basis of one of the sources of the discussion regarding that question of what do you do when someone is on life support and you know that that death is inevitable, or that existence and life as it is are just prolonged misery, and do you intervene or not? There's another story in the Gemara that speaks about that says that sometimes there's a certain continuous noise that keeps a person alive. They bring an example of a blacksmith, that as long as the blacksmith hits the metal and the hammer or the metal that goes down on the anvil, that sound maintains a person alive. And he said if this is the case, the blacksmith is not allowed to stop, because if he stops, he causes that person to die. So they have to have shifts continuously to continue with that. In modern times, this has become a very complicated issue, because in antiquity, when they spoke of prolonging one's life through the sound coming from the blacksmith shop, or not touching his eyes or something like that, that would be a matter of minutes, maybe hours. If you really want to extend it, it will be a couple of days, but not more than that. Just to give a perspective, the Mishnah and the Talmudic sources speak about someone who has fever. They say if 3 days passed and the fever didn't go down, that person is going to die. That was the reality. Up until not too long ago, we are so used to antibiotics and medicines that reduce fever. They didn't have that. Fever would for some people would be a death sentence. And other methods of prolonging life were not so common. In some hospitals in the United States from the previous centuries, the operation rooms would usually be at the top floor. to give the patients an opportunity to commit suicide before the surgery.
Wow.
That was a common thing. So the medicine today has progressed so much, and it's wonderful. On one hand, on the other hand, we could be in situations where people are for months and years on life support, and there's no communication and no physical ability to maintain the body. What do you do in such a case? So most people believe that that is an absolute opinion in Orthodox halacha that this is forbidden, but this is not the case. The first person to speak about that I think it was in the 50s or the 60s was Rabbi Haim Ovadia. Rabbi Haim Ovadia was the chief rabbi of Tel Aviv. He was slated to be the chief rabbi of Israel, but because of political struggles, because he was more identified with the Dati Leumi, the religious nationalist camp, he was pushed aside. Also, rabbi-ovadia Yosef was against him for that reason. He was himself a Talmid of Hacham, the first chief rabbi of Israel, the first Sephardic chief rabbi of Israel after the establishment of the state of Israel, Rabbi Ben Zion Uziel. Rabbi Uziel was of Turkish origin. Rabbi Haim Ovadia was born in Israel, also from. So this is the Sephardic tradition. He delivered a lecture to a group of doctors. I think that actually happened in the 70s, but it's based on an earlier ruling that he had, and he brought those discussions of the Gemara and others, and he explained that there are certain situations where it would be the discretion of the doctors in consultation with the family to decide what is the right thing to do. That it is not totally forbidden. Rather, now we understand the process of the transition from life to death, and where we are the point of no return, where it's inevitable, the death is inevitable, and there's no way for the person to regain certain faculties. So those things happen and they are done, but there's no sweeping decision. No one can say, this is what you do at a certain situation, but it's recommended to always ask, consult, and plan. And better than that, it's the I would say that the best thing to do is to look into the possibility of DNR, do not resuscitate, and go through the documents, read what it means. It means that a person, while still in his or her clear mind and control of their faculties, decide to not ask for resuscitation, which sometimes people end on life support or on coma, and rather they say, don't treat me if this and that happened. So it will be a tough decision, but in most cases it saves the patient and the family a lot of heartache and
I had the situation with my mother, and she was on life, the breathing thing, and we had to make a decision.
Yeah.
Whether to keep her. We as a family decided not to do it because the doctors said there is nothing, there is no turning back.
Yeah.
So where does the Torah I know says life is more important.
Right. But
so the doctor enough to be able to have the family deal with it.
Right. So the thing is, I will say one thing, and I dealt with situations that went both ways. I mean, I had calls from the hospital of the family, and everybody's crying, everybody's in tears, and they say, mom is like that or dad is like that. I said, you want me to come? And I said, no, don't come yet. Don't come yet. An hour later, they call and say they passed away. And it was obvious. I mean, they made the decision, and they just didn't want me to be involved. There were other cases where there was a long process, and we went back and forth with the family, and one specific family, intelligent people. One of the siblings, one of the children was a psychologist. I mean, the people, they knew what was going on, and the reason they sort of made a decision of not continuing the life support, but they held back, and I understood why they held back, because you need to come to a certain point where there's closure, and where there's no sense of guilt, because this could be tremendous guilt to think.
I was blamed for that decision.
Right. To think I did that to my mother or to my father or to anyone who's dear to me. Remember the case of Terry Shivo that after years, still there's this conflict between the parents and the husband and all that. So in that particular case, it was interesting because when the family finally made the decision on their own, it was before the doctors acted on it, the person passed away. And everybody sort of had that sort of peace of mind. But like I said, this is something that nobody wants to think of, but people should know of it and do it at any age. It's not about being at passing a certain age. That's when you do it. This is even young people should do it because we don't know what can happen. So I know it's a heavy discussion for Friday, but we're going to the Mishnah. I'll touch this question that you raised, that what is it? The heart stops beating, the lungs stop functioning, or what people call brain death, which is in itself a process. It's not one moment that is easy to pinpoint. But this discussion is more relevant to the determination of the moment of death, is more relevant to the issue of organ donation. That some organs have to be taken while they're still
Alive.
Right. Right. So, and that is the big problem. I translated for HODS, the Halachic Organ Donation Society. They have a website, and the article is there. I translated an article of Rabbi Yosef Misas where he spoke about that. I mean, his discussion was. When he wrote, it was about the cornea, but then the other elements are there as well. The importance of saving a life, that it has to be done with the consent of the donor, of course. And I'm signed on a donor card through the Halachic Organ Donation Society, with the consent of the donor, saying that I am willing to do that so I could save the lives of others. There are 8 organs there are 13 organs that could be taken, and 8 of them has to be done when the person is still alive, in that transitional moment that a lot of literature is written about. So the mahmirim, like Aaron mentioned, those who are strict and say you cannot do that, are actually mekilim. They're lenient because they say we want to save the 1 second or a couple of minutes of life of that person. Meanwhile, you have 8 other people whose life are going to end if you don't do this procedure. Of course, it's a very fine line with that, and it's dangerous. So, what would people say at a certain point? They say, okay, here we have a murderer. Let's say there's a murderer who was sentenced to death. Are you allowed to kill him in order to get his organs? Of course, that would not be allowed, and that would open the door to. At what one point was a plot of a science fiction novel, it ended up being reality. In China, there were cases, they said that they sentenced people to death for minor crimes in order to harvest their organs. So of course it's a very dangerous situation, but just because it could be exploited in an evil way doesn't mean that we're not obligated to do what is right. Wishing for everyone good health and long life, just to maintain this in mind. And I'll end this with a good sentence from the last chapter of the last comment in the Talmud on this chapter. It says, "B'chol et yu begadecha levanim v'shemen al roshcha al yachsal." It says you always have to dress with white clothes and have oil on your head. So there are 2 different interpretations. One takes it, you have to prepare. So one takes it to the negative. It says B'gadim levanim is like the shroud. You have always think that you're wearing the shroud and anointed with fragrant oil like the dead body. So remember that you're going to die and be aware of that. Another interpretation, a little less harsh, says, imagine that you're dressed immaculately, with white garments, but there's oil on your head. So any wrong movement you do, you're going to stain your clothes. Right. So that's more an instruction of being attentive and aware. And then finally, if you take the pshat of the pasuk of Kohelet, that's from Kohelet, as much as Kohelet speaks about the difficulties of life and all that, he says eventually, at the end of the day, live your life to the fullest, live life to the maximum. Dress well, eat well, find ways to have joy in your life, because when you do that, you're able to share it with others. And that's what the Baruch Adonai, La'olam Amen.